Hi everyone, I'm Tracy Baker and this is Baker Gets Cooking, and today we are going to make basic pizza dough. So this is a basic recipe. You can make pizza with it, you can make focaccia with it, you can make cinnamon buns with it, you can make whatever you like with it. It's just a very basic dough. I have a very heavy-duty kitchen machine here. This is a Bosch kitchen machine with a heavy-duty dough hook. You could use like a KitchenAid type machine. That would be fine. That has a fairly heavy-duty dough hook as well. This is a huge bowl, but the recipe that I'll be making today will fit into a KitchenAid machine. To start with, we need to proof our yeast. So I have a cup of water. Now, yeast is a live organism, and it needs a warm environment to grow. So this water ideally needs to be about 105 to 115 degrees. Now I have this little thermometer, an instant read thermometer here, and I'm going to just take the temperature of this water. Now if you don't have a thermometer like this, the water needs to feel like a pretty warm bath. That's kind of how I would judge it. So this water is a little bit too cool, so I'm just going to add a little bit of hot water to it. Okay, so that's perfect. Now, yeast needs to have some food in order to grow, and the food that it likes best is sugar. So there needs to be about a teaspoon of sugar into the water here. And then I'm going to add the yeast. Now, I prefer... This is Fleischmann's brand. I prefer a traditional yeast. That's what it'll be labeled as in the grocery store. It's traditional. There's two basic kinds in this country anyway. Traditional, which is like the old-fashioned kind, and then there's a rapid yeast, which I don't really care for. Rapid yeast was designed to be put right into the flour. It was designed so that you didn't have to proof it. This is what we're doing here is called proofing. And I prefer the old-fashioned method, and I don't know, maybe that's just because that's how I learned. But I think it's better to dissolve the yeast and let it grow a little bit before you add it to your flour and water. So this is a tablespoon of yeast, and I'm just going to give it a stir. And then we just wait for about 5 or 10 minutes for that yeast to start to grow, and you'll see it develop. It's called a sponge, and it's like a frothy layer that will sit on top of the water. And when that layer is about an inch deep, then our yeast is proofed enough. Now, yeast does go bad, so if you're not planning on using all of your yeast in a timely fashion, it does have an expiry date, so look at the expiry date. If you're not planning on using it that often, keep it in the freezer. It will keep virtually indefinitely in the freezer. It's a good tip because it will go bad just in your cupboard, but in the freezer it will last forever. So keep it in your freezer. That's what I do. So we're just going to wait for that to start to grow, and then we'll be back and I'll show you what that looks like. Hi, we're back, and the yeast has been proofing for about 5 minutes. So that's going to go into my mixing bowl. I've already got a cup of water in here, so I'm going to put that in as well. This is just very basic ingredients. You know, there's like 5 ingredients. There's flour, water, salt, sugar, and oil. That's it. Pretty basic stuff, but it makes a yummy product. So this needs a little bit of sugar in it. I've got a couple of tablespoons of sugar I'm going to put in there. And then I'm going to put in a teaspoon of salt. Salt makes it taste good. And I'm going to put in some olive oil. Now you can put in canola oil if you like, or butter if you like. You just need some kind of fat, and that kind of helps, makes the texture a little bit nicer. This is olive oil that I got from Superstore. So if you live in Canada, it's President's Choice olive oil. It's a really good product. I like it. If I were to choose an olive oil to buy, I would choose one that is in a dark glass container, because it does degrade when it's when light hits it. So choose a dark container and look on the back for an expiry date. Olive oil does go rancid, so you want to buy a product that actually does have an expiry date. If it doesn't have an expiry date, don't buy it. And then you want to look for the origin, the country of origin, and this is from Italy. So I like the taste of this. It's kind of trial and error. You have to buy it and taste it and see if you like it. So I might take a cracker or a piece of white bread and just dip it in there, and then you can really get the flavor of the oil. So this is a pretty mild flavored olive oil. It has a good olivey taste. I like it, and it's fairly reasonably priced compared to some olive oils. I'm going to put 3 tablespoons in here. I should talk about this little cup here. This is a little measuring cup. I really like them. They are manufactured by OXO. On the outside of the container, it has gradients of ounces on one side, and then on the other side it goes up to 1/4 cup mark. And then on the inside, I'm not sure if you can see that, but it has milliliters down one side and tablespoons down the other side. So for things like this little bit of oil, it works really well. So 3 tablespoons of oil. That goes right in there. Okay, and the last thing is the flour. Now this is an all-purpose flour. This flour is from Canada because that's where I live. It was likely from the prairies because that's where I live, on the prairies too. So where you live in the world can depend on what kind of flour you get, because the mills will use the wheat that is more accessible and cheapest for them to mill. So in Canada, in the prairies, we have a hard wheat flour, and it's kind of an all-purpose flour. It's good for making breads. You can make pasta with it, but durum flour is best for making pasta. And the wheat is just, it's a little bit of a different kind of wheat. Durum wheat has a little bit more protein than red hard wheat does. I grew up on a farm. I guess that's why I know all this trivia. Wheat trivia. Wow. Who knew there was wheat trivia? In the southern states, they have a soft wheat flour, which is good. That's what they make their southern biscuits with. And it makes a really nice, tender biscuit. And in Italy, they have different wheat than we do in Canada because they can't grow the same wheat that we grow. Well, they probably could grow. We can't grow the same wheat that they grow because our season's not long enough. So anyway, you'll find that it has different tastes and different textures if you travel around the world. So in the bowl, I'm going to start out with putting about 4 or 5 cups. If you're wanting to make yeast breads, that you'll notice that they often don't give the exact measurement of flour, and that's because the amount of flour can vary depending on the humidity in the air. So if you have a very humid day, if you live in a very humid part of the country, you'll use more flour, and if you live in a very dry part of the country and have a dry day, you'll use less flour. So it's you kind of have to go by feel. So sometimes, and I know I was like this, when you first start out making bread dough, it may not turn out well, right? So you need to practice at it. It's one of those things you have to practice. And don't be upset if it doesn't turn out the first time. Mine never either. In fact, I think they might have played hockey with my buns. Whatever. Sometimes it doesn't turn out well, and that's okay. Just do it again, because it's not rocket science. It's just flour and water, and eventually you'll get practiced at it and it will turn out. So I'm going to go ahead and put 5 cups of flour in there. 5. Now, you know what? If you don't want to make this volume of dough, if you want to start out with a smaller batch, just divide every ingredient by half except the yeast. You'll still need a tablespoon of yeast. And it divides well, it multiplies well. You can really play around with this. So I'm going to turn my machine on, and I'm going to mix it up, and I'm going to see how sticky it is. still a little bit sticky to touch. So when I touch it, it feels sticky, but it doesn't come off on my hand. So that's kind of what you want. You don't want it so sticky that it will stick to your skin, but you want it a little bit sticky so that it's not too full of flour. So I may just demonstrate what the kneading process is for you if you don't have a dough hook like this. And you need a fairly heavy-duty dough hook to make it knead appropriately. So what you want to do is start out with your dough like this. You want to fold it in half towards you, and then with the heel of your palm, push it out. And then you give it a quarter turn, and you fold it in half again and push it out. Okay, and that action, that kneading action, is going to do the same thing that my dough hooks did, and that is develop the gluten so that it's nice and stretchy. And you'll see how nice and smooth that is. It's kind of like a baby's bum is what some people refer to it as. Now I'm going to just put that back in the bowl, and it's going to rise. I'm going to leave it for about an hour or an hour and a half. Now the rising times are kind of flexible. So if you have to go get groceries for an hour and 45 minutes, then that's fine. You can do that. You can let it go a little bit longer. That's not a problem. So although it does take it's like an all-day process, you don't have to be with it all the time. So it's kind of flexible in that way. Okay, so I'm just going to put that in there and cover it again. And I'm going to just let the yeast go to work. And the yeast is going to divide and make those pockets filled with carbon dioxide and make it nice and fluffy. And then we'll be back and I'll show you what we do with it next. My dough has been sitting in this bowl for about an hour and 20 minutes or so. So I'm going to turn it out onto my countertop here. Scrape off the paddles. So this dough is going to make, it's enough dough to make 2 very large pizzas. So 2 10 by 15 inch pizzas. I'm going to divide it in half using this bench scraper, and then I'm going to deflate it. So I'm just going to knead it a couple of times and get all the air out of it. And there is 2. So you can do a couple of things with this dough. I'm making this in the evening so it's Friday night, and I'm making it for supper Saturday. So this dough is going to go into my fridge to rise. And the coldness of the fridge is going to slow the rising process down. And it creates, letting it rise that long creates a slightly unique texture. So the long rise, it develops the flavor more, so it tastes better. I'm going to put it in a greased pie pan. I'm going to grease the top, so I turn it upside down, and then I flip it over so that the oily side is to the top. So we grease the top well. And then I'm going to just cover that with cling film. Loosely cover. You need to loosely cover it because you need to let the air escape from somewhere. So make sure that there's a little hole, kind of like so, in the wrap so that it can rise and there can be air that escapes. So I'm going to leave this in the fridge and come back tomorrow evening, and we're going to make my family's favorite pizza. So we'll see you then.